In recent months, the Serb-majority entity of Bosnia and Herzegovina called Republika Srpska has taken steps that suggest it may be moving toward breaking away from the rest of the country. The entity has passed laws that reject Bosnia's national institutions like the state police and courts, and instead has proposed creating its own separate constitution. These actions have caused serious tensions with the central government in Sarajevo, who declares them as illegal. The escalation has risen to the point that in March 2025, Bosnia's courts issued a nationwide arrest warrant for Milorad Dodik, the President of Republika Srpska, for denying the High Representative Christian Schmidt's decisions. The European Union, NATO, and the United States have warned that such moves by Republika Srpska could threaten peace and stability in the region, so much so that the European Union Force, or EUFOR, an offshoot of NATO, sent an additional 900 personnel to bolster its already existing 600 active troops in Bosnia. So yeah, this is serious, considering this country was engulfed in a brutal civil war in the 1990s. Now the question is, why? In today's video, we're going to talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina, the root cause of the divisions within this country, the Dayton Accords, and why the Serb Republic, or Republika Srpska, wants to secede. Welcome to The Sovereign Thinker. Like, share, and subscribe so you too can be a sovereign thinker. Since the end of the Bosnian War in 1995, Bosnia has been operating under the framework of the Dayton Accords, a peace agreement mediated by the West. Dayton was signed by the warring parties in Bosnia to officially end the bloodshed and lay the groundwork for the Bosnian state. However, to say this framework is dysfunctional is an understatement, but more on this later. For now, what's important to note that the Accords divided Bosnia into two entities: the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, populated mainly by the Bosnian Muslims and Bosnian Croats, and Republika Srpska, populated mostly by Bosnian Serbs. This essentially means Bosnia is rather decentralized, and this decentralization is, as many argue in Sarajevo, the cause of the dysfunction. The point is simple: if Republika Srpska were to integrate more with Bosnia's central institutions, then the state would operate more effectively. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, as always in geopolitics, things are never this simple. The first thing to understand about Bosnia is that ethnically it is a homogeneous country. There are no differences between the so-called peoples of Bosnia. The divisions at first glance lie in religion. Today, the country is made up of three main religious groups: Islam, Orthodox Christianity, and Catholicism. Media outlets often describe these religious differences as ethnic divisions, but this is totally misleading. The people of Bosnia are one and the same. They share the same language, culture, history, and even physical appearance. They've lived together, they have intermarried for centuries, and at first glance, even the locals can't tell each other apart. Labeling them as ethnically different is simply incorrect, but it is politically correct to do so, and that's the important distinction. So keep that in mind as an FYI if you ever meet someone from Bosnia. But then, what explains the deep divisions? Why are they referred to as different ethnicities? And can religion alone really shape such strong fault lines in a society? The answer to these questions is permanent presence. Permanent presence runs deep in this region. Southeastern Europe is a strategic location, sitting at a crossroads. Therefore, many empires and occupying forces have passed through this region over the centuries. The legacies of these various empires, beginning with the split of the Roman Empire into East and West, and later the Ottomans, the Austrians, Venetians, and even the Vatican, have left a lasting imprint on the psychological landscape of Bosnia, which was generally caught in the middle of all these occupying forces in one period or another. Religion, in fact, is just the obvious surface, the visible layer. It's the outward representation of the deeper effects of permanent presence that shape how some Bosnians see the world, how they interpret their past, and even how they view one another. But what even is permanent presence, you may ask? Well, in geopolitics, this is when a state or empire conquers a region and then actively works to integrate or assimilate the local population. The empire's longevity doesn't simply depend on stationing troops or building forts or bases. It depends on converting the conquered subjects into loyal subjects. They are essentially reprogramming identities using soft power like ideology, religion, culture, or politics, which ensures the empire's grip stretches across generations. A great example are the Romans, who spread their language and ideals so effectively that many conquered peoples over time came to see themselves as Roman. They would live, work, and die for Rome as if it were their city. This all ensures that Rome's interests in some faraway corner of the empire are secure. This is the root of Bosnia's enduring divisions. Religion alone is insufficient in explaining the fragmentation among one and the same people. Division in Bosnia and the former Yugoslavia in general is a result of the unseen geopolitical force of permanent presence. Yugoslavism was an attempt at consolidation, a project led by Serbia to eliminate the lingering effects of permanent presence in the region. The goal was to forge a new Yugoslav identity and build a stronger unified state, one that could no longer fall prey to foreign powers. Consolidation in geopolitics is when a state seeks to unify peoples who are either ethnically identical or closely related to its core population in order to form a larger, more cohesive nation. We saw this with the unification of Italy, France, Germany, Russia, although the Russians had limited success specifically with Western Ukrainians. So like the other European countries before them, we saw the attempt at consolidation among the Yugoslavs as well. But why then was consolidation being led by the Serbians? Well, largely because they had resisted the influence of permanent presence, generally speaking. But that said, it's important to also recognize that not all Serbs were immune to this pressure. Over the centuries, many converted to Catholicism or Islam, many of whom actually identify today as either Croatian or Bosniak, respectfully, and they did this to either escape persecution, pursue economic opportunity, or because they were genuinely drawn to the appeal of the ruling powers, because after all, it's often easier to conform to dominant social norms than to resist them. But as we know, Yugoslavia failed, the country fell apart, and foreign powers were able to exploit the differences and pin the Yugoslavs against one another. This was most evident, tragically, in Bosnia. As I mentioned earlier, the Dayton Accords were signed in 1995 to finally bring peace within the country after 4 years of brutal war. And what brought about the Accords was the NATO bombing campaign against Bosnian Serb forces, forcing Republika Srpska to abandon their attempt to remain with Serbia and instead join with Bosnia. From the outset, this was a bitter pill to swallow for the Bosnian Serbs, who were largely opposed to being a part of a unified Bosnia. However, from their perspective, the agreement at least preserved a degree of autonomy within the country. As the saying goes, in any compromise, no side gets everything at once, but it was a necessary step to end the war. Now, this brings us to why Republika Srpska continues to push back at any attempts at centralization. They argue the only reason they went along with the Dayton Accords was because their autonomy was guaranteed. Any attempts to undermine their autonomy would mean they fought the war for nothing. But here is where things really get interesting regarding this story. We need to now focus on the Dayton Accords and its impact on Bosnia. To put it bluntly, the Accords have made Bosnia a Western colony. And without going into all the details of the Accords, I want to focus on two main points that demonstrates Bosnia's unfortunate position as a Western colony, and that is the office of the High Representative and the Central Bank of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Let's start with the Central Bank. The Central Bank of Bosnia and Herzegovina was established in 1997. Its currency, the convertible mark, or BAM, was created by the IMF, Germany, and other international actors. In fact, foreign advisors played such a significant role that for the first 6 years, the governor of Bosnia's central bank was Peter Nicol, a New Zealander. Additionally, what makes this even more twisted is Bosnia runs on a currency board arrangement. That means the central bank can't even print its own money or set interest rates. Every BAM has to be backed by euros sitting in reserve. And what does this mean, you may ask? Well, it means Bosnia hasn't got control of its own monetary policy. Bosnia's economy is basically chained to the European Union's, and its future depends on the EU staying stable. This doesn't exactly scream sovereignty. Instead, it essentially locks Bosnia into a system that makes it highly dependent on the European Union, something that the Bosnian Serbs are not happy with, to say the least. Now, what takes the cake in Bosnia is the Office of the High Representative, the OHR, one of the most unique, controversial, and sometimes even outrageous institutions in Bosnia. The OHR was initially designed to help oversee the implementation of the Accords and ensure peace after the Bosnian War. I want to be clear, this is an international body, not a Bosnian one, backed by the United Nations, the European Union, and other major global powers. At the head of this office is the High Representative, a foreign-appointed diplomat with extraordinary powers and who is not elected by Bosnians. And when I say extraordinary, I mean it. The High Representative can remove democratically elected officials, veto laws, and even impose new ones without local approval. These are known as the bond powers. And the current High Representative is Christian Schmidt from Germany. He, like his predecessors, were appointed by the Peace Implementation Council, a group of international stakeholders who oversee the OHR's mission. His appointment was done without UN Security Council approval. So, with its financial system deeply reliant on foreign currencies and economies, and with its political system dictated by unelected officials, Bosnia, my fellow listeners, is a country that has no sovereignty. This brings me back to Republika Srpska. Republika Srpska sees the current political setup in Bosnia as just another form of occupation, like they've seen in the past centuries with previous occupiers, and they simply want nothing to do with it. The Peace Implementation Council is made up of countries who have traditionally worked against Serbian interests, and so Republika Srpska is naturally suspicious of them. I would like to extend an olive branch to Sarajevo and highlight their push for centralization. They argued that it would create a more functional state if the country was more centralized, which is actually probably true. The basic point is, if we can create a more functional state, we can then move to create a more independent central bank and remove the OHR. In other words, to move beyond Dayton and gradually reduce foreign oversight. But in reality, Sarajevo's push for centralization is only a short-term strategy. Bosnia's path that has been set by foreign players is for the country to become part of the EU, NATO, and all the rest, only making the end of Bosnian sovereignty official, something the Bosnian Serbs at this point in history fundamentally reject. History is a strong guide here. Serbians have always called things the way they see them, and in this case, they see foreign occupation, and they see the Bosniaks and the Croats shaped by the lasting effects of permanent presence, once again siding with the foreign occupiers. It's just that plain and simple. For Republika Srpska, Dayton is just the latest chapter in a long history of outsiders meddling in the internal affairs of the region. However, it's important to note that even though Republika Srpska has a negative view of Dayton, they often use the Accords as both a shield and a sword to protect its autonomy and a sword to push back against centralization and foreign interference. The Bosnian Serbs no longer believe that consolidation is possible. They've accepted the reality that half the country doesn't see eye to eye with them. In their eyes, Bosnia is simply ideologically too different and too far gone. But Republika Srpska, on the other hand, is still intact. It's still under Serb control, and for now, that's enough. That's the ground from which they hope to chart their own path, separate from a system they see as fundamentally foreign and imposed. So, where do we go from here? Honestly, I'm not sure. I'd love to say the people of Bosnia just need to let go, forget about foreign powers, let go of the wrongs done by all sides, and start seeing each other as one people to build a future together. But then again, we've heard this before. That was the Yugoslav dream, and we all know how that ended. Therefore, the reality is, time will only tell. The world is shifting. Big geopolitical changes are happening, and they're going to ripple throughout every region on the planet, including Southeastern Europe. Back when the world moved from a bipolar system to a unipolar one, it rocked the foundations of Yugoslavia and the entire region. So it stands to reason, as we now enter a multipolar world, this region won't be untouched. The status quo will crash in Bosnia, and what arises from it will be anyone's guess. Until then, let's keep our fingers crossed for Bosnia. Much love to the people over there, and ciao for now.